Hello and good Monday to everybody. Welcome to Believe in Purdue. I'm Sam Springer, as always, joined by Grant Flora. Grant, it's Monday.
It is. Uh,
uh, let's jump right into it. You know, the Boilermakers dropped their second in a row. This time at the hands of the Wisconsin Badgers in Mackey Arena on Saturday. Grant, this was a tough one to watch sometime.
it was, and it was one that I thought Purdue would come out and really respond well to. I mean, usually coming off a loss, we've talked about this. Purdue can respond well and
Yeah.
bring a fire the next game. They were at home against a tough opponent. I'm thinking, it might not be easy, but I think Purdue's going to be able to find a way to win this one, if not win it by a significant margin. And it looked like it might be that way in the first half. And then Wisconsin did a great job closing the first half strong, which we've talked about that kind of like in the Ohio State game. They closed that first half strong, came out in the second half and got some momentum. And next thing you know, Purdue has a 9-point lead and is flipped to a Wisconsin double-figure lead, and Purdue could never get back in it.
Well, and one thing that we have to take into consideration, and it's a hats off to Wisconsin, because at one point in the second half, they'd taken 11 shots in the second half and made 9, so they caught fire. And that's not to say that there maybe wasn't things that could have been done by Purdue to disrupt some of those shots, because multiple times. Let's say it this way: not many teams are going to miss dunks or point blank lay-ins uncontested, because a lot of time that I'd seen, or a few of those 11 shots in that second half, they played 20 seconds roughly of decent defense and then a backdoor cut right there to the hoop.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I was thinking during the game, I'm like, Wisconsin did a great job offensively of being patient, waiting for the opportunity to open up, taking it. They did a great job creating opportunities, especially from three. Like, yeah, they caught fire, but they also had a lot of really good looks. There were some tough ones from Tanjay and whatnot, but like Janicki and Winter, some of those type of guys got open threes and knocked them down. Like, they were good looks, but they made the most of them. But like you said, with the backdoor thing, not only were those backdoor, not only were they late shot clock, but they were on some of Purdue's best defenders. I mean, Braden Smith got backdoored. CJ Cox got backdoored. That can't happen if you're those defenders. Those guys have got to be able to be watching their man of the ball. They just got caught ball watching, and they slipped right backdoor on the baseline, and it was an easy deuce with like 3 seconds in the shot clock sometimes. I'm thinking Purdue's going to get away with it with a stop here, maybe we'll get some momentum, and next thing you know, it's an easy basket for Wisconsin.
Well, Wisconsin put 5 into double figures, led by John Tanji, who averages 19 points a game normally this season. He scored 32, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't going to be easy, but that was one of my keys. Is we had to do something to disrupt him from getting. And if you're going to let him score 20 points, you want him to have 20 shots. He only shot the ball 15 total times, and he produced 32 points on his own.
Yeah, and all of his misses were from three.
Yeah.
He honestly is definitely one of the best transfers in the country. I mean,
Sure.
Jazz Lanier is right up there. Got some other transfers like that have just really stepped up and done well in the SEC and in some of those other big time programs. But John Tanjay, I feel like, isn't talked about as much, and certainly within the Big Ten, is one of the best players overall, let alone transfers. So he is a very good player. But like you said, a 32-point game is not necessarily what we saw coming, and he did it efficiently. Like, this was about as good of a game as Tanjay could have played.
And on the Purdue side, Braden Smith, people were criticizing, 6 points. Let's drop him out of people's conversations. Okay, we had this conversation last week too. This young man knows how to run an offense and make it work. Purdue scored 84 points. Let's call it what it was. This was a defensive breakdown that lost this game, and a really hot shooting Wisconsin team. They shot 61.5% from the field. That is insanely good. And Purdue shot 51.8%. But to get back to Braden Smith, he only scored 6 points. He was, 2 of 10 from the field, but he had 12 assists, 1 turnover. That's it. 1 turnover. So his assist to turnover ratio was 12. I mean that you can't ask for much better from a point guard, except for with Braden Smith, you expect him to score more.
Yeah, and I mean, as a team, Purdue only turned it over 4 times. That's about as low as it's been all season, and for them still to lose is pretty remarkable. Braden Smith, like you said, 12 assists, got some rebounds as well. I think he had 5.
5.
Only the 1 turnover. The 6 points hurts, especially because he was 2 of 10. Like, he was really inefficient. But Wisconsin really did a nice job trying to take him out of the game as much as possible. I mean, they were really pressuring him. They forced him to pass, which is why he got his assist, but he really was not going to get great looks offensively. He did get some, didn't convert. So, like, not his best game, but obviously Wisconsin was trying to do that. That's why TKR ends up with 30. Because they didn't double him from what I saw. They pretty much just let him play one-on-one, and he made the most of it. But I think you look back the last even 5, 6, 7 years at these Purdue teams and the style of basketball they play, teams have more success against Purdue when they kind of allow the post players to do work on the inside, but they make sure they shut the water off on the perimeter. And that's at least what Wisconsin's plan kind of was. And even though Purdue still got 10 threes, 10 of 22 is not bad at all from deep. You shut down a guy like Braden Smith, force him to pass, you give TKR some more breathing room in exchange, but you make that trade-off, it actually can bode a little bit better for you. In this case, Purdue still scored 84 points, but the defense worked well enough to keep them from getting momentum. The crowd never was able to really, really get going because every time Purdue scored a couple of baskets, Wisconsin would respond.
Well, looking at the bench produced a heck of a lot more this time than they did against Michigan, which was the big fat goose egg. But the defense, or the bench, still is a concern of mine. But what concerned me a little bit was Fletcher Loyer had points right away early in that game, and then all of a sudden, I think he had 10 in the first half. I think maybe, but then he ends with 15. So he kind of faded off real quick, and then all of a sudden wasn't there for a while as a viable option for the Boilermakers. And I'm not criticizing him or the fact that he was able to or did go away, but that is frustrating because when somebody's got a hot hand like that, you don't want it to go away.
Yeah, and you look at his numbers: 4 of 8 from the field, 50%; 2 of 4 from 3, 50%; 5 of 6 from the free throw line. It's not that he was taking shots and just missing them. He wasn't taking shots, and he has to hit that aggressive self of his for the entire 40 minutes, or I guess 28 minutes that he played. The point being, he doesn't just go away. In the second half, he wasn't getting those looks. He wasn't hunting his shot. And especially when Braden Smith's not rolling as far as his scoring, like, he has to be there. If 2 of those 3 for Purdue, their big 3 that we talk about, Loyer, Smith, Pickoff, and Wren, if 2 of them aren't scoring consistently, it really becomes a struggle. I'm a little surprised they even ended up with 84 points, given the fact that Fletcher was inconsistent, Braden wasn't scoring a whole lot, TKR was the only one really rolling.
Yeah, and TKR, he played 37 minutes, which is far and above what he averages, but he played a lot of minutes. He played really well. He ended up with 4 personal fouls, so technically he was in foul trouble, but really a really well put game for him. He's 12 of 16. That's great shooting. 6 of 9 for the free throw line. So I mean, he put together maybe the only thing that really he wasn't really on the didn't get too many rebounds, but honestly, with Wisconsin shooting 65%, you really don't have a ton of opportunities.
Yeah, and not only did they shoot 61%, but they were 32 of 52 from the field. So they missed 20 shots total. 18 of them were from 3. They only missed 2 2-point field goals. Like, obviously, you're going to shoot a lot better from inside the arc, but to only miss 2 and to make like 20, they were 20 of 22 from 2.
Yeah,
like,
my apologies. I meant 61.5, not 65%.
Right, but like, yeah, that's either way. I mean, if you shoot over 60%, all right.
Right. Are you there?
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Something happened. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah, 61.5%. They only missed 2 2-point field goals. Like you said, they didn't give Purdue a lot of opportunities for defensive rebounds. Wisconsin only had 2 offensive rebounds, which I'm actually surprised about because if you miss threes, you're going to get a lot more opportunities for those offensive rebounds, and that's pretty much all Wisconsin missed.
It was a frustrating game for the fact that, like you said, in that first half, it looked like Purdue was getting it rolling. It looked like they were going to be able to. And Game Day Gabby and I, she was on Friday. We talked. We thought it was going to go like that, to where Purdue was going to. Wisconsin's not bad. We know that they're not a bad basketball team, but we also know what Purdue's capable of doing, and we figured it would be a little bit of a we're keeping them at arm's distance, but it's never going to be a blowout at the point to where you're putting in the back half of your bench 6 minutes in or left in the game. But it never materialized, and that hot streak that Wisconsin had started in the first half, but it was because Purdue started not producing the way they had the whole first half.
Yeah, and certainly they just couldn't quite keep up with them. Defensively, I'm just concerned because you look at what Wisconsin had in the backcourt between Blackwell, between Tanjay, who I would still call a backcourt guy, just being that third option, and then Klesmet. Basically, no matter what, Purdue had a matchup disadvantage whenever Wisconsin kind of just choose which matchup they wanted to exploit. Between Tanjay and Blackwell, they were size. They had good size, and they were very athletic. They could just kind of get what they wanted as far as driving and shooting. Klesmet, it felt like every time he touched the ball, he drew a foul. And credit to him for making that happen and putting the officials in a position to make those calls. I think some of them were questionable. I don't feel like Caleb First should have fouled out of that game. But at the same time, it's just... And Purdue has to do a better job of making sure that they don't put themselves in position to get fouls called. And that's what we saw at Michigan too. Do I think those whistles should have been blown? Not necessarily, but Purdue put themselves in that position. And they've got to find a way to play more disciplined defense so that they're in front of their man and they're vertical all the time, and the official isn't going to make that call instead of being a little bit off and out of position where they still maybe aren't fouling, but they're in a weird position, and so the official is put in that position to make that call. It's a lot easier said than done.
Sure.
But they got to figure out that way, because if they get in foul trouble, Caleb First fouling out of the game actually hurts this team a lot, even though his scoring numbers aren't necessarily there. He fouled out both Michigan and Wisconsin, and it has really hurt.
Yeah, and you mentioned the three in the backcourt, because I agree, John Tanjay is, I would say, is a guard as well, but Blackwell, Klesmet, Tanjay accounted for 60 points. I mean, that's a lot of guard production. And don't get me wrong, like we said, we talked, 61.5%. They only missed 2 2-point field goals. That's insane that they only missed that many within the arc. But again, though, that 20 seconds of good defense, then all of a sudden the back door, it's really hard to expect a team to miss layups and dunks when they're point blank uncontested most of the time. It was an unusual game to see the defense be kind of the reason why the game went the way it did.
Yeah, and I mean, we've always known, I think Purdue is probably a better offensive team than defensive team, especially with their lack of rim protection. And their lack of athleticism in the backcourt. I mean, Fletcher Lawyer has just been one of those guys that teams have been able to exploit. And I think Wisconsin was able to do that between Tanjay and Blackwell and all those guys. If Fletcher Lawyer got switched onto him, they could attack him. Yep. But even Cox and Smith, I mean, those guys, all three of those Wisconsin backcourt players were totally comfortable taking their matchup one-on-one, being able to either score, draw a foul, create some sort of play that led to an easy basket.
Well, it's not the end of the world by any means. I've seen some people making statements that well, it was good while it lasted, and I'm sitting here thinking, you know what, we still have a really good team that right now, if the season ended, probably is a 3 seed. I mean, that's still a really good basketball team. They still have plenty of really good basketball to play, and tomorrow is not any easier. So we're going to go ahead, take a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, we will talk about the Boilers' trip to East Lansing to take on the Michigan State Wolverines. We're going to take a break for the audio podcast. We'll be right back. You're listening to Believe in Purdue on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. Okay, we are back. Okay, so it doesn't get any easier for the Boilermakers. It is 7 p.m. from the Breslin Center on Peacock, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Boilermakers travel to Michigan State to take on the Spartans. Spartans fresh off of getting Tom Izzo the all-time Big Ten wins record, passing the late Bob Knight. Grant, it does not get any easier after dropping a game like they did against Wisconsin.
No, I mean, we're looking at honestly what could be a 4-game losing streak if they can't get it done at Michigan State. Then you got to go to IU, who played them tough at Mackey, and then is obviously going to be looking for revenge there. But looking at Michigan State, I mean, if Purdue has any hope at a Big Ten championship after these last 2 losses, I think this has to be a win. Because that brings Michigan State down to 11-4 in the conference, or 10-4, whatever it is.
It'd be 11.
And it puts Purdue, it would put Purdue up to 12-4. So they would be a half game ahead with the win over Michigan State. Then it becomes a matter of Michigan. And the good news is Michigan State still has 2 games against Michigan. They could find a way to win them both. Even if they don't and they only win 1, Michigan could drop another game, and now at least there's a chance for anybody. So I think, again, if you're Purdue, this has to be a game that you respond well and win. If you don't, you're probably not winning the Big Ten anymore. But outside of that, this is going to be an interesting game because Michigan State is one of those teams that doesn't really have a single player that is a super major threat, but they have 5 guys that are really solid and can do damage at any time. So you really don't know what you're going to get from Michigan State on a given night, but someone's going to provide, and someone's going to make Michigan State tough.
Yeah, that's if you remember us talking to Mike DeCourcy, he said there's a good chance that one of the best teams in the conference, Michigan State, doesn't even have a player that competes for the Player of the Year award in the conference. And he said that's not at all a knock on any of those players individually. They play together as a complete squad, and that's why they had been rolling in which they had at the time that we had talked to Mike. These guys, the big thing is going to the Breslin Center. If you let Michigan State get rolling, and we saw IU take them out, that crowd out of the game, and subsequently beat them. But if you let that crowd get rolling, that team builds off of that even more. Not to the equivalency that Purdue does at Mackey when the crowd gets rolling, but that Breslin Center does get loud.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the second hardest building to play at in the Big Ten behind Mackey Arena. Could argue for like Chrysler, Assembly Hall, those places have been tough depending on how good those teams are. But the point is, like you said, if this were at Mackey, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about Purdue coming out and being able to handle them.
Right.
But now you have to go at Michigan State and against a team that is just really solid and could pose some potential issues. I mean, Fuller and Xavier Booker on the inside, it might not be too difficult for Trey Kaufman-Renn on the offensive end, but defensively and rebounding, those guys are going to be tough. And Michigan State is always a good rebounding team, and they're going to give Purdue a run for it on the glass. So you have to find some areas for Purdue where you can take an advantage. It's been forcing turnovers in the past, but it clearly wasn't on Saturday. They only forced 3 turnovers against Wisconsin. if they can't find some of those avenues, it's going to be really tough for them to do what you talked about, taking that crowd out of the game and being able to establish a bit of a lead.
Yeah, there's not many games you can say, well, we turned the ball over only 4 times, but we lost the turnover battle. You can't. There's not many games you're going to do that. But looking at the Michigan State output, like you look at the points average per game. Jaden Akins and Jace Richardson are the only ones that average double digits, and Richardson is at 10.3. But you go down 8 deep if you want to go 10 deep. Actually, yes, 10 deep in averaging at least 5 points a game. That's not a ton of points per game per person, but when you have 10 of them doing that and then there's more doing more, that leaves a lot of options for the Spartans. And I think that's what is not concerning, but the biggest roadblock is which one is going to be the one that decides he's going to blow up that game. And I think Purdue has got to make a statement and just play lockdown defense like they have in the Wisconsin in the last 6-7 games. Wisconsin's the outlier. Purdue's done a very good job with their defense for the most part during that time span. Even the game against Michigan, they didn't play horribly. They just didn't play good enough defense. Or you maybe even say offensively. Well, that's what I would say because of the bench. But I mean, you've got to play some lockdown defense against the Spartans.
Yeah, you got to lock them down defensively, and you got to rebound. I think that's maybe against Michigan, in addition to the offensive end, what really hurt them is they played decent defense, but they couldn't rebound. Michigan got some second chance opportunities. So I think, with Michigan State, you have to rebound. When it comes to their depth, I think what will affect this game a little bit is how the officials officiate it.
Yes.
If they are blowing whistles left and right and Purdue starts getting in foul trouble, and Michigan State too, that favors Michigan State because they got 10 guys that can play at any position and be comfortable. You take even one of Purdue's starters out, they're pretty much a significantly weaker team with the exception of maybe bringing in Jakari Harris for CJ Cox. That's a sub you can make. But like Caleb First gets in foul trouble. They're in trouble. Obviously, one of the big three. And even CJ Cox, you don't want him to get any sort of foul trouble is going to significantly weaken Purdue, whereas Michigan State can handle it a lot better, especially being at home. So I would hope that for Purdue, Michigan State, which is always a bit more physical because of the style that they play, the big-time Big Ten game, I would hope they'd let them play a little bit more, but we saw them against Michigan and even against Wisconsin. The officials officiated that tighter and didn't let as much go. I mean, they called a flagrant 2 against Wisconsin for a play that I would have personally gone with a flagrant 1, and I think most people would.
Flagrant 1 because there was no intent to it. I didn't think there was intent to that. I think the way he was going, it just happened to hit TKR in a very unfortunate spot.
Right. And, I mean, originally the foul wasn't even called against that player. It was called against TKR for a moving screen. So it's like, how does that go from an offensive foul to a flagrant 2? It's unfortunate for him. Luckily for Wisconsin, they still got the win. So, again, it's about how this game is officiated will definitely play a role in whether Purdue can handle the punches that are thrown or whether they're going to just kind of be weak and kind of, I don't want to say fold because I don't think their mentality would be that. I just think fold because they just run out of guys that can play and they can't hang with the Spartans.
Well, and that's a big thing right there is what you're saying. I don't think Purdue ever gives up. I mean, it's really not a thing that I don't think Matt Painter would allow any of his teams ever to give up. But at the same time, he recruits and develops these players to never have the give up mentality, and that the big part here is they've got to jump out and not necessarily fast offensively, but they've got to make some buckets, and they need to limit how easily Michigan State gets their points. Michigan State's going to score. Michigan State's going to defend pretty well, and they're going to cause some turnovers. But at the same time, Purdue knows how to handle these guys. Good teams. They've beaten really good teams. they've lost to really good teams. So it's I am not by any means giving up on a potential Big Ten championship. I don't see that as out of the realm of possibility at this point. Now, I agree with you. They drop this one tomorrow. Then we're looking at probably just get to that 2-round bye, and we'll be okay. Stay in the top 4. Which another thing is Wisconsin's now tied with Purdue in the Big Ten with their record. So now you've got Wisconsin to worry about as well, because technically they have the tiebreaker. So if they tie for 4th, Wisconsin gets the 4 seed because they beat Purdue, which means Purdue plays then on the Thursday. But let's worry about that one later. It's just a matter of staying within the game, in your game plan, and not letting Michigan State get carried away with exploding and getting the Izzone into it, and then all of a sudden you're playing 6-on-5 because that crowd is much like another player.
Yeah, and I guess some good news, bad news. Bad news, Michigan State shoots 80% from the free throw line as a team, which means if you get behind, you start having a foul, you're probably going to be done because Michigan State's at home and they shoot well from the free throw line. Good news, Michigan State only shoots 29% from 3, only has 2 players that shoot over 33% from 3. So if Purdue is a little bit more lapse prone on the defensive end and gives up some open shots from 3, they won't necessarily get burned. Now they could, because Michigan State's at home and they get rolling, they could catch fire.
About that time, they'll hit 4 or 5 straight.
That can happen. Yeah, it can happen against Purdue. Certainly, can happen at any time. Like, I'm not gonna tell you that a team could ever just leave them alone from 3, but they are maybe less likely to get burned if they were to have some lapses. So that's really nice for Purdue. Maybe they can pack it in and try and do a better job rebounding and not having to fly out on those 3-point guys. But again, back to the officiating situation. If they're calling a lot of fouls, another reason that benefits Michigan State is they shoot it really well from the free throw line. So hopefully Purdue can find those areas where they are a little stronger and can exploit them and kind of protect the holes a little bit.
Well, the big thing is let's not have a 3-game losing streak. That to me is the best remedy. Is let's go beat a good team and we'll forget. You can almost not necessarily forget, but put that further in the rearview mirror that you don't have to worry about that 2-game losing streak again. Let's get back on track, and let's get back on track against a good team like Michigan State. So it will be a fun game potentially to to watch. It'll definitely be interesting to see how each team responds, because Michigan State coming off of a big game where they were trailing to Illinois and went on a 15 or 17-0 run to end the game and beat the Illini, and then Purdue having a lackluster performance in ways against Wisconsin after dropping a really tough one in Ann Arbor. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out for those 2 different teams and the 2 different dynamics in which they are both a part of right now.
Yeah, certainly interesting. Again, like you said, 3-game losing streak is never good. And if you go into Indiana with a 3-game losing streak, like, that's just not a place you want to be. So
you don't want to tighten up having to win in
right.
Assembly Hall.
This week is really important, because if Purdue finds a way to win both games, then hey, they're right back in it with a chance at the Big Ten with a decent seed in March. They feel like they're back on track.
Yeah.
They drop both of them, or even just one of them. Like, wow, they've lost 3 of their last 4. They're just really kind of struggling and falling back, and they start to feel like they're limping towards the end of the season. There's never a place you want to be.
Well, we'll see how that works out. Thanks for joining us on this Monday edition of Believe in Purdue. For Grant Flora, I am Sam Sprunger. We'll see you on Wednesday.